What do railroads, alarm clocks, President Arthur, and fireworks have in common? Shocker! Another episode of the Gilded Age. Hey everyone, this is D, Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addicts, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And today, of course, I'm coming to you all with another episode of the Gilded Age, Season 2, Episode 7, Wonders Never Cease. This episode is directed by Michael Engler and written by Julian Fellows and Sonia Warfield. So we open up this episode seeing New York draped in the colors of the grand old flag. This, of course, is to celebrate the upcoming opening of the Brooklyn Bridge, which the president will also be attending. We then see Mr. Tate meeting with who he assumes is George Russell, but instead is met by Larry. To make a long story short, Larry is not happy about the situation involving Mrs. Roebling, and he hopes to rectify that. And Mr. Tate says that she will be properly thanked for her efforts by the mayor at the opening. But any further efforts made to reveal the extent of Mrs. Roebling's contributions will likely lead to a public outcry he cannot risk happening. Elsewhere, we see the elder Mr. Russell with Mr. Clay as he updates him on the current state of the mill now that everything has been settled and everyone is back at work. This came along with George's concessions, which included more safeguards, medical care, and even a children's park. Not to mention the pay raise. Mr. Clay is clearly irritated at this current development, but then George reveals his master plan. He is offered a modest raise on the 6-month contract for the tradesmen only, which will then split the union down the middle. By the time the contract expires, the laborers and the craftsmen will likely hate each other. Not to mention the Catholic immigrants and Jews. In the meantime, Mr. Henderson will be transported over to New York for he and George to take a picture together, to confirm that Mr. Henderson is in fact the undoubtable winner. George may have somewhat of a heart when it comes down to it, but it's clear that his penchant for strategy and domination still outranks everything else. It is also clear that Mr. Henderson can see straight through George and his strategy, especially knowing what it will ultimately mean for the conflict between immigrants and American-born citizens. But conclusively, he has decided to accept George's offer based on his decision to keep the militia from firing upon them. His personal sympathy aside, George knows that such an action would have only led to additional sympathy for the strikers. I mean, just look at the first railroad strike of 1877. Not only was it the first major rail strike, but also the first general strike in the nation's history. And the incident that George refers to did happen in Pittsburgh, where the governor was forced to call in National Guard troops from Philadelphia. The troops then chose to fire into the rock-throwing crowd, which killed more than 20 civilians, including women and at least 3 children. The public counteraction to this was not only swift, but shockingly catastrophic. Namely, a massive conflagration that raced through the city, destroying 39 buildings, 104 engines, 46 passenger cars, and over 1,200 freight cars. Consequently, the Pennsylvania Railroad claimed losses of more than $4 million in Pittsburgh. The effects of the strike across various states briefly paralyzed the country's commerce and led governors in 10 of these states to mobilize 60,000 militia members to reopen rail traffic. So yeah, strategy or no strategy, George has clearly made the right move. Alas, the rest of the owners do not see it that way. They have now been forced to follow suit, which includes installing expensive safety measures that they never agreed to. But there's one thing they can agree on. Now, instead of setting all of them against the union, George has now set all of the owners against himself. Uh-oh. Next, we see that Bannister and the wheels that began turning in the last episode have led to a surprising development for Jack. He has written to a Mr. Schubert about Jack's predicament, and he also will be meeting with Jack to see if anything can be done about his patent. If anything can be done, Mr. Schubert will know, as he is the secretary of the Ermache Verein der Stadt, New York. Translated from German, this is also known as the Watchmakers Association of the City of New York, which was also founded by German clockmakers at the end of the war. Later we see Jack speaking with Mr. Schubert and explaining the process he went through to create the new wheel that runs without oil. Since Mr. Schubert recognizes that Jack's expertise clearly outranks that of several of their members, he'll see what he can do about his membership. It seems the answer is plenty, as Jack then receives a letter confirming that he is an official member of the Watchmakers Association, which now means he is in the perfect position to apply for his patent. Considering some of what happens in this episode, I'm glad there's at least one bright spot in the mix. Dare I say there might even be a second? We see Mrs. McNeil, aka Flora, making her way to the Russell household and asking for none other than Watson. As it turns out, Flora has no desire for her father to leave New York. Unsurprisingly, all of this was done and planned without her knowledge. What's more is that seeing the letters that Watson has sent to her husband has rather complicated matters. In the end, she wants her father to remain here in New York with his own apartment and own life, and known as a retired banker named Collier, which is technically the truth. He'll even be able to meet his grandchildren and be a part of society again. But it also means that he'll still have to give up his job. And despite the general happiness of this moment, why do I feel like this situation isn't going to turn out the way that it should? We then see Marian preparing for a luncheon in honor of her and Dashiell's engagement, and of course she is discussing with Peggy whether she has made the right decision in accepting Dashiell's proposal. On paper, Dashiell has everything that Marian could possibly want out of a husband, but when it comes down to that deeper emotional love connection, yeah, it ain't quite there. If anything, it sounds like respectability is the basis of this relationship, which, given the society they live in, makes sense, but as far as ensuring a long-lasting, successful marriage, not so much. But there's no time for that, as we then fast forward to the luncheon, where we see the Reverend toasting to Marian and Dashiell's happiness. Marian is surprised to learn that she will not have the luxury of a long engagement, as Agnes is ready for wedding plans and a ceremony as soon as possible. It seems another engagement may be impending, as Oscar informs Aurora of his plans to propose to Maud. We then see the Black elite gathered together to combat the growing issue with the Board of Education, the closing of Black schools, and the general displacement of many teachers within their community. After speaking to white teachers, Mrs. Garnet has assessed that they will likely need to increase the number of pupils that they have. This, of course, includes enrolling white students into their classes for the Board of Education to actually care. Reverse integration. Surely I'm not the only one seeing the irony here. Mr. Scott, Peggy's father, emphasizes that when it comes down to it, the only way these white parents will consider enrolling their children is if they hear from someone who is also white and also a teacher. But thankfully for Peggy, she already has someone in mind. We then see Marian advocating on behalf of the Black teachers, which leads a Mr. Patrick Ryan, an Irish teacher, to join Mrs. Garnet's cause. What's more, he knows plenty of other Irish teachers who have faced their own prejudices that would be willing to join as well. The battle isn't over yet, but victory may be just over the horizon. Later, we see Peggy at a rooftop party thrown by the Wyatts to celebrate the opening of the Brooklyn Bridge. And once again, Black elite come through. I just love the fact that we can see everyone in their element, in their ball gowns and their tuxedos and suits. And it's like, look, The non-black rich elites are not the only ones who know how to show up and show out. I love it, but you already knew that. We see Peggy having a conversation with her mother, and as any mother would do, she insists that her daughter make time for a personal and social life amidst all her professional aspirations. She also reveals that she knows that Peggy and Mr. Fortune were the only journalists assigned to the Tuskegee story, despite that being the opposite of what Peggy told her. Mrs. Scott knows that Mr. Fortune is quite taken with her daughter, but to use modern phrasing, she knows well enough and hopes that she has raised her daughter to not fall for the okie doke. Now, jumping back to the beginning, we see Bertha having a rather surprising conversation with Mrs. Astor. And given what Mrs. Astor said at the end of the last episode, it would appear that her plan is officially being set in motion. Mrs. Astor has pulled many strings and even pushed others aside to put Bertha at the top of the list for the Academy, which means that yes, she will be receiving her very own box. Score 1 for Mrs. Astor? Bertha is quite thrown off by this unexpected development, but she says that she will go ahead and speak to her husband before she comes to any sudden decisions. And George's response is not surprising. He's like, look, Mrs. Astor, she's playing you. And when it comes down to the Academy, it is too small, it is too unambitious, and it is purposely excluding the people that are making the city great. So at this point, this whole metropolitan situation is actually beyond Bertha. It is also about changing the landscape of New York, its culture, and its people, and she will be the one leading the charge. But at the Academy, it ain't happening. Jumping forward to the charity committee, we see all the high society ladies gathered together. Mrs. Astor mentions that she's been helping Mrs. Roebling with the reception for the Brooklyn Bridge opening. And what's more, she mentions to Bertha that they must find a time for her to come and inspect her box at the Academy. What interesting timing. Everyone is surprised to hear this, including Mrs. Fish, who wonders if Bertha has finally waved the white flag in the opera war. Gotta love an instigator. And unsurprisingly, at least to me, Bertha is very grateful to Mrs. Astor for her kindness, but considering that the Metropolitan is her winning racehorse, it makes little sense to change her horse now. Naturally, Mrs. Astor is quite offended and insulted that her plan to entrap Bertha has officially fallen apart. So rather than stay, she makes a quick exit and departs the committee meeting. Sadly for Bertha, this only fuels Mrs. Astor's determination to beat Bertha at her own game. We later see her at the reception for the Brooklyn Bridge opening, meeting with President Andrew and introducing the Duke of Buckingham.
Oh, hell no!
Oh my. Score 2 for Mrs. Astor. I do believe there's a phrase that goes, if you can't beat 'em, join 'em. But in this case, I think Mrs. Astor believes that if you can't beat 'em, just buy 'em off. And when it comes down to it, Larry just can't help himself. He reveals to everyone at the reception that it is Mrs. Roebling who has made immeasurable contributions to the completion of the Brooklyn Bridge. Although she expresses her gratitude to Larry later, Mrs. Roebling believes that it is likely that the true nature of her contributions will undoubtedly remain hidden. Considering all the information I was able to find on her for this recap and the last, I am very happy to say that is not the case. So when it comes down to Reverend Forte, I am going to have to minimize my commentary because this whole thing made me kind of frustrated and I can't give it too much, to be honest. What I will say is that we see a very poignant moment between Agnes and the Reverend where we see her sitting by his bedside, and he realizes that she was right to resist the marriage. Considering his age, he wonders if it was a mistake to pursue and even marry Ada. But Agnes disagrees. She realizes that the Reverend has given Ada a taste of the love and happiness that has eluded her for most of her life. And now, despite him being gone, she will only have to think of him to feel warm, cherished, and deeply loved. One of the last moments we see with Ada is when she tells her husband that she'll be fine and it's okay if he goes now because being loved by him has made her strong, and he thanks her for loving him back, and not long after he passes away. This is probably going to make this part of the video longer than I wanted it to be, but I just had to say this really quickly. Death is already an emotional thing for a lot of us, and I think sometimes, depending on the show or the movie or whatever it is, in any sense, in any medium, it makes us emotional because we can relate to some aspect of our lives where we've had that experience. But I also have to say what hits a little bit deeper for me is when someone genuinely wants the person that is dying or about to pass away, when they give them the freedom to transition with peace. You know what I'm saying? And it doesn't change the fact that it's heartbreaking and that, you know, that's the last thing we really want. But to tell someone like, hey, it's okay. You don't even have to worry. Yeah, that's just one of those things that makes me emotional. One, because I never had the experience. You know, that was never my experience with death. It was just like the person was here one day, then all of a sudden I look up and they were gone. And it was explained to me, but I didn't understand. There was no transition. There was no time to process or understand to be like, oh, that's okay. They were just gone. And when I think about scenes like this, another scene that also made me equally emotional, which is such a random, reference, but Avengers Endgame, that scene with Tony and Pepper is having to like very matter-of-factly say like, hey, Tony, we're gonna be okay. You can rest now. And even though her heart is breaking, she says it because she knows what that means for him, and that's what he really needs in the end. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, that scene got me because that is a very poignant and powerful thing to do for someone. And so even though I'm mad that this is the outcome, I was just like, why? Just the fact that she was able to recognize that, even though she knew what would come after the fact. Yeah, that hit me right here. And that's all I can say. Now, on the more frustrating side of things, we see Oscar the Occitant having a conversation with George about the Casterbridge Pacific Company, which, as far as Oscar knows, is the company that bid against George for the Chicago and Atlantic Railway. However, George has never heard of the Casterbridge Pacific Company, and he makes it a point to know about every major player in the industry. So, what does that mean? That means that the company does not exist, as he discovers for himself when he makes his way back to the building it was housed in to find the office vacated and completely empty. He also discovers that Maud's residence is actually the home of a Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore. And what's so funny is that in the last episode, when he picked up Maud, he was kind of like, oh, why are you standing outside? She was like, oh, just, wanted to take in some air. And so, of course, circling back, I was like, oh, because I was very confused. I was like, how? And I realized, no, he never knocked and she came out. He just always saw her outside. I honestly don't have words. Oscar is still not my favorite, but he was doing a little better. And I was really hoping I wouldn't have to say this again, but I have no choice. When it comes to Oscar.
Loser!
I don't think there's been a more consistent L-taker on this series like Oscar. I honestly think he's broken a record at this point. Aurora all but confirms the fact that no one actually knew who Maud was. She simply became a part of the group. Which means that Oscar is now the victim of an old-fashioned scam. And that Maud has managed to deceive everyone, including Oscar. But now the only thing Oscar can do is admit everything that has happened to John, who, is there for him and, is comforting him. But he also knows that he now has to admit everything that has happened to his mother as well. We then see everyone across the city enjoying the fireworks display that is celebrating the opening of the Brooklyn Bridge, which also includes Borden and Mrs. Bruce. But clearly, there is no such celebration for Oscar. He finally admits to his mother the next morning that he has made an investment with the Van Ryn money. But now there is no way to get back the money, as Maud has absconded with it, and there is no way of finding her. And Agnes is now horrified to realize that her son has invested nearly all of the money that has kept the Van Ryn family afloat for not only decades, but centuries.
Oh, hell no! No!
While the opening of the Brooklyn Bridge may serve as yet another symbol and signal of new beginnings, Oscar's miscalculation may now signal the end of the Van Ryns. And that closes out episode 7, Wonders Never Cease. Yes, they don't. They really don't, because wow. I mean, you talk about throwing me for a loop. Like I said, there's only but so many twists and turns that we get in this show. And the whole thing with Maud, did not see it coming at all. I mean, I figured it was going to be some kind of blunder he was going to make. Like something was going to go awry with the money and then Maud and him. But there's no way. There's no way I could have even anticipated this. When I saw that empty office, I said, oh. And believe me, I know that scams are not new. I mean, financial crimes, all that kind of stuff, no way. So I'm not new to this, but still, it's just, I would never have thought of it at all. Not happy about the Reverend. I'm like, why do we have to do Ada like this? Just like, why? Like, I understand that's life, and I've seen plenty of situations where people, there are things that can happen to and from a wedding, and like tragedy can strike at any time, but I'm just like, it's not fair. Like, doing my girl Ada like that, I'm not happy about it. But anyway, gotta wrap this up, move on to the finale so we can close this season out. As always, please feel free to drop down below and leave your thoughts on this recap and the episode in general. So, once again, this is D, Movieman, signing off, and I'll see you at the movies.